On today's show, it's been quite the offseason so far for AJ Preller and the Padres by their recent standards, but could one of the things left to do, in fact, be bringing back Luis Arraez?
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, January 7th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for 6 years now, soon to be 7, not just for this podcast, but also various other outlets, including justbaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by FanDuel. We love FanDuel very much. Wildcard round is here in the NFL, and FanDuel is officially in that playoff mode with you. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Be sure to go check that out, guys. And as always, you're listening to the Locked On Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is number one. Remember, it is the number one podcast network. It's true. Go look it up. All the outlets are saying this. So be sure to do that, guys. We're going to be talking a little bit about some free agency additions on today's show, including responding to some of your guys' suggestions, which, remember, you can leave a comment in the comment section of this video or any other video, and I will respond to them because it is off-season mode, and I love hearing from you guys and some of your suggestions for free agents, and one of them being Luis Arraez. But before we get into some of those questions and comments and just talking a little bit more broadly about the free agency picture, I just want to mention this little thing that has to do with all this stuff, right? And that is that at the time of this episode, by the time you're hearing this, there's been some like reports out there that seemingly made it appear that Edward Cabrera, who is a player that the Padres maybe might have been a fit for, like match it team-wise, the Marlins. We did this a couple weeks ago. Go check that out with Armley, and really fun episode talking about Marlins as possible trade candidate spot. But it's interesting because it was reported and it hasn't been confirmed in all these different things. And I think that it probably means that maybe some medicals didn't come back as good as they would want. But here's what I'm trying to say, right? Combine that with the fact that, according to Dennis Lin of The Athletic, one thing that he mentioned in his big questions, right, which we're going to talk a little bit more on Friday, the big questions remaining for the Padres this offseason. So I won't spoil everything for then. But in terms of one of the things that he talked about was Okamoto, and he said that like sources tell him that the Padres were never really close to signing him. So combine the Edward Cabrera thing with and the reporters potentially getting it wrong that trade is going to go through. Again, we'll see by the time this episode finally comes out. But combine that with the Okamoto not actually being someone that the Padres were all that close to getting. It's just a reminder that in free agency, in trade deadlines, all that sort of stuff, a lot of teams, it's just reports are going to be very flimsy. And you need to take them with a grain of salt. That's not me saying that they're lying. That's not even me saying that they're necessarily clickbait. Sometimes it is true. Sometimes they're like, well, I did hear a report that the Padres are talking to Okamoto. That's still news. And it is especially news for the Padres, who are a team that for the past, as long as I've been covering them, right, 6 years, and even before then, have made so many moves, trades, free agency signings, dare I even say a minor league deal every now and then, that any type of move, any type of rumor is something that I like to talk about, right? I've been getting a little bit of flack in the comment section about bringing up Mason Miller being traded and how idiotic it would be. I'm just going off of what I've heard in reports, right? If it's an official Javier Reyes exclusive, I promise you will let it know because I am insufferable and I refuse to not get credit for something like that, right? But otherwise, that's what I just want to preface everything on today's show and frankly future shows with, which is that things are flimsy. We don't know how everything's going to go down. I like bringing this up with prospect evaluations, that just because X prospect is valued this highly doesn't mean the team values them as highly, doesn't mean that a player at the major league level is valued as highly. We don't know for sure what's going to happen. So it's always funny to me when trades go down, they're like, wow, that's all you had to give up. And you know what I mean? Hey, this should get you this and this should get you that. We just don't know, right? But we're trying our best to play out the logic and whether or not it would make sense for this Padres team as best as we can, right? So firstly, before we get into some more of the free agency stuff and your questions, I just want to talk about what's happened so far for the Padres offseason, right? just so everybody knows, in terms of remaining free agents from the team, Luis Arraez, Nestor Cortez, Omar Cruz, Elias Diaz, and Jose Iglesias are free agents that the Padres have. I do not believe any of them are going to re-sign with the Padres. Maybe a slight chance at a Nestor Cortez, only because he didn't pitch very well coming off this past season, coming off the injured list. Never made an appearance in the playoffs, but he has had some success before in previous years. So I could see him being like, you know what, I'll take a deal that's kind of small. Or maybe it's just that that's all there is out there, right? So Nestor Cortez, just a reminder, Nestor Cortez with the Padres didn't do too much this year. He had a 6.29 ERA, right? Everything was bad. He was worth negative wins. He came back. He was a mess, right? But it was only 34 innings. And before that, he had a 3.7 ERA, then a 4.9, then the 2 years before that, 2.4 and 2.9 respectively. I do think he's an interesting guy to potentially bring back on a short 1-year deal that doesn't cost much, and potentially he balls out and gets paid what I think he could have gotten paid if you just take a look at his years before this year, before the injury, right? If you only do up to 2024, I think that's a guy who gets at least like a decent size deal, like what Merrill Kelly got, right? I believe 2 years, 40 is what he got. I could see something around that for Nestor Cortez potentially materializing, or maybe a little bit less, 2 years, 30 million, something like that. I could see potentially materializing. But with the bad years, I'm just saying it's not something to be ignored entirely. And then also in terms of notable subtractions, obviously, for the Padres, Dylan C signed with the Blue Jays, Robert Suarez with the Braves, and Ryan O'Hearn with the Pirates. And in terms of the Padres acquisitions, Michael King, obviously the headliner of this offseason, a big signing that, while it is very possible that that is the only major thing that they do this offseason, it was a sign that, look, they can still get creative. They're not only going to be signing, Tyler Malleys and Nestor Cortez and Rich Hills. You know what I mean? That's what I feel like when you follow reports, it's been made out to be that that's the only type of free agent they can afford. And they got creative and they were able to bring back Michael King. And also, there is still a possibility that they trade from their major league roster, freeing up some salary. So there's still a lot of possibilities for the Padres, I think, for the remainder of the offseason, so long as you don't think that those possibilities entail big top 20 free agents. That I do think is gone. But remember, they didn't do that in 2024. They certainly do that in 2025. And they still were a team that did pretty well, right? They already have those big players that can be impact guys. So do not freak out about that, even though it is scary. I get it. You're used to it. It was so fun. We were living large, where we were just casually giving money to Bogarts and Manny and Musgrove and all these guys, right? But not necessarily anymore, at least for the short-term future. And in terms of what else did they do, Kyle Hart, they re-signed on a 1-year deal, which I think is interesting. Right-handed pitcher. Relief pitcher, Ty Adcock and Dyson Acosta, both to 1-year deals, and then Tristan McKenzie to a minor league deal. And the last one I think of those, Tristan McKenzie was nice for a couple stretches. He had a lot of potential, and who knows, crazier things have happened. But I do think that the Padres still, it's first base / DH and starting pitching depth is definitely probably at the top of their list. So as far as I'm concerned, all these guys are worth talking about, from the McKenzies to the Kings to the litany of guys that could fit the DH or first base spot. It's going to be a big question for the rest of the season, the offseason for sure. But folks, before we talk about some of those free agency guys and some of your suggestions for who the Padres should go after, let's be real. Managing your finances can feel a pretty bit overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that just keep going up, right? It's hard to figure out where all your money actually goes. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. But guess what? That's where Rocket Money comes in, right? The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings, right? It's amazing sometimes that I check, I'm like, wait, I'm paying how much for Marvel and for Netflix and for Hulu and for these random Substack subscriptions I have, whatever, right? Like, that's really good for the app to let you know and just give you an idea of how much you could be saving, give you an idea of what goals you want to be striving for each month, for the rest of the year, and all that sort of stuff. Great. It's great. Automatic transaction categorization is a game changer, man. Let me tell you, you see where your money goes. You can set your budget goals. It's a command center for finance in a lot of ways, right? Like, it's just giving you the whole big picture, guys. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com, one more time, /lockedon. Go and check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here at the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing as always, talking about some free agent stuff for the rest of this offseason. Look, there's still, in terms of the top free agents, there's still a lot there, right? Don't get me wrong. There are still a ton of top free agents available. It's actually just frankly really exciting. Like Kyle Tucker is still out there, right? Pete Alonso signed. Framber Valdez is still out there. Bo Bichette is still out there. I actually think Bo Bichette might be the next one off the board for what it's worth. That's just what I'm feeling, what I'm hearing, perhaps. So we'll see if that comes out true. But no, that is not a Padres player. And frankly, none of the top free agents are Padres player. But if you look at the rest of the free agent class, I look at this and I just see opportunity. I really do. I see potential here. I see a guy like Max Kepler. I see a guy like Mike Tauchman. Guys that can fill in and be bench players. And then I know that those aren't the most exciting names to start out with, right? I get it. I see a guy like Marcell Ozuna, who I understand that he wasn't very good last year, and he is only a DH, which might be a problem, especially if you're trying to, move things around. Do you want him to be your permanent DH for the rest of the entire season, right? But you could get him for nothing, and he would give you some power upside potentially at 35 years old. Yeah. Does it say a lot that we haven't heard any rumors about him? Potentially, yeah. But I look at this, and again, I just see opportunity. I see guys that could be really, really solid for this team. I look at Nathaniel Lowe at 30 years old. He's not at the end of things. He can hit for a decent amount of power, right? I could see Rhys Hoskins. You want to really, really buy low and just hope that there's something that the Padres see that could return this guy back to what he used to be. I personally don't see it, but he is power, right? And that's the big thing. If you're a team that has all this on-base stuff, you've got all this pitching, you've got all this relief pitching depth, I don't think it's an awful idea to just kind of take shots on guys that can hit for power. It wasn't too long ago in 2022, before he injured himself for the rest of the year, that Rhys Hoskins hit 30 home runs. He had an on-base percentage of 332, 334. Decent numbers, 120 WRC pluses all of those years. And every season of his career, he's had at least a 100 WRC plus. This past year, yeah, not as great, right? He wasn't as great this year, but 12 home runs in 90 games, you could do worse as a guy who you could swap between Gavin Sheets and him at first base and DH if you want to move them around, right? I think that could absolutely work. And even last year in 2024 with the Brewers, again, not a lot of defense, right? He's not a very good defensive player. His on-base skills weren't great, but it was his first year back from the injury. He had 26 home runs. And that is already more than basically everybody on the team, right? So that's how I'm kind of viewing it. And I just don't think that it would cost too much to get a Rhys Hoskins, especially at this point. And at his age of 32, I think that could be a great player. I really stand by it. I think he might even be one of my favorite free agents available right now, honestly, in terms of just guys that can help solve a little bit of their power department thing, right? That's how I feel. Again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. If there's someone else out there with some interesting sort of numbers that maybe I'm not looking into, but I really like Rhys Hoskins, man. I just think that is a great low-cost move who immediately adds power, and that's what the Padres need, even if it's flawed. This is not a team that is in desperate need of contact hitters. Right? We've got like 7 of them. And then we have on base guys and Tatis, right? Like they don't need that. What they need is power, put the ball in the seats, even if it comes at the expense of some batting average, some on base sort of metrics. And in this case, defense, because you already have the rest of your outfield figured out with Merrill, with Tatis, with Laureano. You've got Cronenworth. You have our man Sung-Mun Song, right? You've got all that sort of stuff figured out. I think taking a chance on Hoskins would be really, really awesome. Genuinely. I think that I would actually... Maybe this sounds like someone who knows that the team can't afford the big options anymore and knows that they don't have as many prospects. So I'm talking myself into lower tier free agents, but I really do think Rhys Hoskins could be amazing, man. I might actually do a full episode on him going forward, but we'll see about that as the offseason transpires because Lord knows the Padres, they don't go long without making news, let me tell you. But let's talk about some of your guys' questions in terms of free agents, right? First, we got one from @LilCasinoMusic who says, I hope they sign Eugenio Suarez and Nick Martinez. ... Go Pods. I appreciate that. Go Pods indeed, sir. As always, I will say this. Nick Martinez, there's a couple of things about this. Number one is that the Padres don't have really a history, and frankly, not a lot of teams do, of bringing back a guy like this. Right. I do think that he would be an awesome free agent. I think that he could get a nice 1-year deal at age 35. Right. But I think teams like the Tigers, the Athletics, and the Nationals, 3 teams that my buddy Clay Soda of JustBaseball.com wrote about, actually, Cleveland Guardians. Right. Like, I just don't think that that's something that the Padres need. And I think Martinez would actually cost not a pretty penny in the traditional sense, but I do think that he would cost a little bit, even if it is a 1-year deal, because he's been really solid over these last few years. Like, genuinely, he's accounted for almost 5-6 wins over his last 3 seasons, which is pretty good for a guy who's basically just a reliever, kind of Swiss Army knife starting pitcher every now and then. Just the definition of solid. Could they bring him back? That would be really fun. It would just be a good vibe move, but I don't think that that's where the Padres want to allocate their resources, at least right now. Right? If you're going to spend some money, I think it should be on a bat. Like, if you use the most of your money, I think it should be on a bat, but that's just me. And then in terms of our guy, Eugenio Suarez, there's no way in heck that the Padres can afford someone like him right now, at least assuming a trade doesn't happen, right? Assuming they don't shed some salary. This is a guy who's been nearly a 4-win player for the past 4 seasons, and he had some 4-win seasons before that. He hit 49 home runs this past year. He hit 30 the year before that. Like, I get it. It would be super sexy. It would be fun, but they do not have the capital to be able to get a player like that. Again, unless they shed some payroll. And also, he's a pretty good defensive player at third base. So I think that you would be wasting him a little bit on the Padres. At least, not a great defender, but a pretty adequate one. He wasn't great this year, but the past couple of years, he had some good defensive metrics. Shortstop, he's played a little bit of there. He played shortstop back in Cincinnati, right? He did that before. First base, he doesn't really have a lot of experience there. So I think he's going to get paid a little bit more like a third baseman, or like just a guy who's going to hit for a lot of power and all that sort of stuff. So don't see that happening. And again, third base is all locked up. You know what I mean? It's all locked up. Could you have him as a DH? Sure. But for the price he is going to cost, you're going to want a player like that in the infield. So I do not see that happening, my man. But I do appreciate it because, man, that's a lot of power. But there's still so many. Guys, there's still so many other free agents, including one that I despise oh so much, and that's Luis Arraez. For anyone who's been following the show for the past year or so, right, and frankly for the past 2 years, a little bit, his first year with the Pods wasn't that bad. I was actually pretty bullish on him going forward, but didn't end up being good. Go look at my bold predictions before the season started, where I was talking about how excited I was for Luis Arraez. I was such a sweet, innocent child back then, man. I was such a sweet child. Man, things change, guys. And a lot of things are still going to change with this Padres roster. Believe that, even if they have the constraints that they do. And there are some more options that you guys brought up that I do want to talk about, because I love talking to you guys. Duh. But first, let me just take a second to talk to you about football, guys, because the wild card round is here, and so is FanDuel, because they're in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Open the pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. They lean into the game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, coaching. You just pick one, whichever sounds the juiciest that you already like, instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play, it feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. So visit FanDuel.com, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So that's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday with FanDuel. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back thriving and vibing on the show, because what else is there to do on the Locked On Padres podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the biz. Let me just say, if you guys heard me hiccup at one point, my bad. Had to pause for a second because I got a crazy bout of hiccups. But let's keep talking about some of your questions and comments regarding free agency, right? First, we got one from @RamaMurdy9938 who says, I don't know if we can say yet if Sung-Mun Song will be able to hit Major League pitching. The KBO is much better than AA. It would be great if he shows he can handle hitting it. I would trade Cronenworth if we can get a good return or package him with another player. But what other under-the-radar free agents would you pursue to fill out current holes and strengthen our bench? I probably should have led with this to start the show. That's my bad, because this was asked last week. But again, I really think Rhys Hoskins is one of the guys that I really like. I talked about Tyler Mahle, who just signed, I believe it was with the Giants the other day. And in terms of starting pitchers, what I'm looking for is like really low tier guys. Maybe if they want to, if there's someone out there that we don't fully know about, that maybe they're looking to turn themselves into a starting pitcher, right? That's been a little bit of a trend lately. If that were to happen, right, I think Luke Weaver already signed with the team, but I know that, yeah, he signed with the Mets. Like, he's an example of a guy that there were some reports that they were thinking of turning him into a starter, right? If you want to do that, that could be an interesting way to build out the back end of your rotation. Just kind of get some decent players in that regard. Get a Jalen Beeks, even a Luis Garcia. Now he's 39, actually, my bad. But any kind of player like that that might have that sort of Joe Ross, right? He's been up and down, to say the least, as a player, but maybe he wants to give the starter thing one more chance. I could see that. And in general, I just really like what I see. If they want to sign any relief pitcher, frankly, I'm fine with plenty of these guys if they want to take a shot at them. But in terms of starting pitchers, like straight up starting pitchers, and this is just me, like, this is one that could fully just be me. Like, this is probably a dumb idea, but I can't help but feel like I'd give Jordan Montgomery a shot. I know it's dumb. But the way I see it is he had a 3-year stretch where he was awesome. Then he got hurt and he never really felt the same. And he was bad in 2024. Really bad. He signed late too. If you guys remember, he was a Boris client and he signed really late. Didn't materialize. Things were really, really bad. His FIP was a little bit better at 4.48 compared to his 6.23 ERA. And then he got hurt, didn't really pitch at all this year. So you would be able to get him for basically nothing. And that's why I think I'd like him. I just think he's shown a decent stretch of being the perfect example of a back end starter that could really help out any major league team. So I wouldn't hate that. Tony Gonsolin was at least an all-star before, so I don't hate him. Alex Cobb, if there's anything left, but I probably don't want to sign a guy like Alex Cobb just because that is just such a player that feels like, to me, like if he finally does fall off with the old age thing, it'll happen with the Padres. A little bit like Nelson Cruz, right? Nelson Cruz, who was a steady producer for years, Padres side of that, it turns out, yeah, he was cooked. You know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't do that necessarily. Apparently John Means is still available, according to MLB.com. And I thought that he signed with a team, I could have sworn, but he's another guy who's a little bit like Montgomery, where if you just look at his ERA, he's been a low ERA guy literally since 2021, but man, he hasn't pitched literally at all. So if you signed him, that might even be like a minor league thing, right? A little bit similar to Tristan McKenzie. Tomoyuki Sagano wasn't terrible last year, but not great. Herman Marquez, he's 31 years old, and he was really bad these past couple of years, but he's been a guy who's been in trade conversations for eons because everybody felt and knew he could be so much better outside of the Rockies and especially outside Coors Field. So if you were to go and get Herman Marquez, I just wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate going out and signing one of these dudes who it's just upside and hoping for better, right? You're just hoping, oh, maybe Jose Urena can give, that's a bad example, right? Marquez, like I just mentioned, can you get him? Can you go out and turn Walker Buehler into something, right? He was quite bad last year, but it was his, kind of his second season. So maybe he's still recovering from the injury, right? John Means, I just mentioned, if you want to bring in Cal Quantrill, right? But I actually think Cal Quantrill will cost a little bit more money. So I'm all for just taking little pot shots at these back end guys. And that's kind of why I really like the signing of Tristan McKenzie, who is a guy that I think his problem personally, it's not good that the Guardians of all teams, a team that has produced pitching almost like no other, that they're kind of out on him fully. It seems like one of the things that happened with him is that he just kind of didn't get his Tommy John surgery, which is probably what he needed to do, right? But if the Padres sign him, maybe they see something, maybe they still see some value here. And I love the kid too. He's such a fun personality. I hope he turns it around because when he was on, he was a really good pitcher, man. Like from 2020 to 2022, this is a guy that a lot of people felt like could be one of the next up and coming pitchers in the league. Didn't give up too much hard hit contact, right? And then he was a decent strikeout pitcher. So maybe he's a guy that's going to compete with your Randys, with your Johnny Brito type players, right? And in this case, Matt Waldron, right? Like if you just have those guys heading into spring training, maybe they could deliver a little bit. The good thing about McKenzie is that he's also young. So taking a shot on some of these younger-ish pitchers, Walker Buehler at 31 years old, right? Tony Gonsolin, maybe even at 32 years old. Herman Marquez at 31 years old. Montgomery is 33, okay, but not too far removed from success. I think that's the way to go. And I know it's not exciting, but it makes way too much sense for the Padres right now to just get creative, sign some of these pitchers that haven't been showing anything lately, and let Niebla cook. I am totally on the side of working with that strategy if it comes to starting pitching. And every team needs starting pitching, but trust me, guys, there are teams that need starting pitching a lot more than the Padres do. But getting some kind of reinforcements, seeing what works in spring training, low-tier kind of contracts that don't have a huge downside, I'm a big fan of it. Big fan of it. But that's not all, guys. We got a question from @Ryan Bibbins 6595. I don't think the Padres will spend more money at this point, but I also don't see them going after any of okay, so you meant I think the Padres will spend a little bit more money at this point, but I also don't see them going after any of the big money guys either. You recently gave your picks for guys that the Padres should go after. And with that in mind, what do you think about these three vets who shouldn't require long-term deals or come for huge money? Marcell Ozuna, slow down a bit, but look at who he played at DH last year. Great point, by the way. That's a great point. Guys, any free agent that they get, if they bring in Rhys Hoskins, that is immediately better than probably what they were rolling out last year. I know that sounds really harsh towards Arraez, but it's not only there's a good chance of him being better than Arraez, but there's a better chance that he just fits what this team needs more. What about Nick Martinez and or Chris Bassett? All three have very good WAR ratings. And a wild card, Carlos Santana and or Paul Goldschmidt. I believe Carlos Santana actually signed. I'm going to look that up really quickly, though. No, he hasn't actually. He's 40 years old. So again, I would just be scared of the you know who's going to finally fall off bat-wise with the Padres? It would be Carlos Santana, right? Like, I don't want to go after the Nelson Cruz, Matt Carpenter types where you're just hoping that you could get a little bit more out of them. I would rather be like, let's take some guys who are undervalued and not going to cost much and are still young enough to potentially turn things around, right? I mean, heck, Jerk's a profile did that at like age 30. So why can't our guy Rhys Hoskins do it? So I don't mind it. Already talked about Nick Martinez. Already talked about Paul Goldschmidt on a previous episode. Goldie, I don't hate, but he just doesn't fit what the Padres need. You know what I mean? They need some power. They really do. And I don't hate him. I think he's a fine player. I actually think he's going to be a fine vet for people to pick up. But 103 WRC plus last year, his best days are behind him. And again, doesn't hit for power. Only 10 home runs in 146 games last year. Slugging of just 403. Not a guy that the Padres want. And again, I don't want to go that direction. Let's get creative and not just sign someone whose name value. Sign a Rhys Hoskins and Nathaniel Lowe, guys who are still young enough to potentially have a next chapter of their career instead of just we hope you're still on the good part of your last chapter. If that makes any sense, I don't know. I might just be rambling. But we'll see, because Lord knows they need someone. Last thing, though, bring back Arraez potentially from @Mr. Listen to Me, please. Look, man, let me think. Look, he also brought up, hey, switch hitter Bryce Johnson. Maybe we could use him off the bench, hit through 42 with 25 hits. Yeah, I brought up Bryce Johnson as being a solid fourth outfielder. I think for this team, I could see that materializing, him getting some playing time for sure this year, depending on how the Merrill, Tatis, Laureano spread goes. Maybe guys need days off. Maybe Song, depending on where he's playing certain days in the lineup, if they want to use righty-lefty splits, all that sort of stuff. I could see that materializing. I just don't see Arraez making sense. I think Arraez is a solid free agent for a lot of other major league clubs that are just going to be like, hey, we don't have the funds, but could we sign this guy to a small contract and hope that he recaptures when he was really, really hitting, when he was a 330 hitter who was hitting the ball all over the place. He was slugging just enough with the doubles and walked just enough to really heighten his value. Low-cost signing, I could see it. But for the Padres, can't play defense. He's not fast. I think he genuinely ruined parts of the lineup, although that part wasn't necessarily always his fault because Schilt kept batting him second. I thought that was baseball malpractice. I stand by it through and through. I just don't think he makes sense for the Padres. But I do think that as a flyer, like if you're a Reds team, if you're a Rockies, if you're a Pirates, if you're a Yankees even to a small degree, if you're just a team that needs a little bit more of a contact hitter to diversify your lineup, and you don't have the funds for a big time player who could do everything like a Kyle Tucker or a Bo Bichette is a better example of a contact hitter. I think Arraez could work for a lot of teams, but not for the Padres. I just don't see it. And I don't want to see it again because I don't want to even have the possibility that they bat this guy high in the lineup again because he's a 3-time batting champ, which is a defense that is used of Arraez way too much because he just doesn't offer enough across the board. And I understand that I recommended a Rhys Hoskins who doesn't offer as much, but there's a world in which he just makes more sense as a DH for the Padres. Arraez isn't giving you enough as a DH, and certainly not as a first baseman, and certainly not as a second baseman because he is quite bad as a defensive player. So it just makes more sense. Get some power. That makes more sense for the Padres and this lineup. Again, guys, Rhys Hoskins, I brought up the 26 home runs. That is already going to be more than basically every single player on the Padres all of last year, with the exception, of course, of Manny Machado and our guy Fernando Tatis Jr., who hit 20. Oh, it would have been. It would have been more than Tatis. I thought Tatis hit 27. Oh, no. Tatis hit 25 home runs this past year, right? That would already be more. Think about that. Like, that's a huge plus. And then you'll swap him out. He's probably not going to be an everyday player. You swap out him or Nathaniel Lowe, whichever free agent fits the bill. Play Song at a different position. Maybe Cronenworth is going to DH some days. I'm just saying, like, that could totally work. I really like it a lot. I feel like I've convinced myself more than listeners about Rhys Hoskins this episode, but let me know what you guys think about some of these free agent ideas. We're going to talk about more of these things on Friday, including the biggest questions facing the Padres going forward into the offseason, and a whole lot more next week, depending on what happens, right? We're going to have to see what happens in the news. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe and check out the YouTube channel wherever you are. I will be getting my Padres hat back on soon. I just lost it while I was traveling. I don't know where it is right now. It's in my bag somewhere. But until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friday faithful homies, take care.